He mocked my failed startup, then I fired him and his entire team from MY Global Company. The air in the boardroom was not merely thick with tension, it was a physical presence, a humid, suffocating blanket that settled over the polished obsidian table, a prelude to the storm that only I could feel brewing. Sterling Thorne, robust and radiating an almost comical self-importance, was in the midst of his presentation, his voice a booming echo of past dismissals, each word a testament to a career built on bluster and inherited privilege. He paced, a restless, corpulent figure in an expensive suit, gesturing grandly at the holographic display before us, which shimmered with intricate diagrams and complex data flows, ostensibly detailing the needs of what he termed his company's most critical, transformative project to date. His words, a torrent of corporate jargon and thinly veiled pleas, were not just directed at me, but specifically at Nexus Innovations, the global tech giant I had quietly, meticulously built from the ground up. He spoke of urgency, of unparalleled innovation, of a partnership that simply had to happen for his company, Legacy Tech, to not just survive, but to truly thrive in this rapidly evolving landscape. He was oblivious. Utterly and completely oblivious to the seismic shift that was about to occur beneath his very feet, a shift I had orchestrated with the precision of a master clockmaker over the course of a decade. I sat there, perfectly calm, composed to a degree that some might find unsettling. My gaze was unblinking, unwavering, as I absorbed every word, every subtle inflection of his privileged, self-satisfied tone. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips, known only to me, a private acknowledgement of the years of discipline it had taken to cultivate such stillness, such control. My team, seated around the vast, dark table, watched with respectful attention, their faces mirroring the focused professionalism I cultivated within every corner of Nexus. They were the best, hand-picked and trained to anticipate, to analyze, to execute with silent efficiency. None of them, of course, knew the intimate, searing history I shared with the man now pleading for our services. None of them knew the years of quiet planning, the relentless, almost obsessive dedication that had brought us to this precise, perfectly orchestrated moment. He saw a young, immensely successful CEO, a prodigy of the modern tech world. I saw an arrogant ghost of my past, a figure of monumental injustice, now ripe for a reckoning that had been a decade in the making. He was reaching for salvation, completely unaware that the hand extended towards him was the very one he had once tried to crush, the one that now held the fate of his entire empire. The game was finally, definitively, on my terms. Every piece had been moved, every strategic advantage secured. My journey here, to this meticulously planned confrontation, began not in a gleaming skyscraper, but in a cluttered garage, bathed in the anemic glow of fluorescent tubes. It was a space redolent with the metallic tang of new circuit boards, the faint ozone scent of humming servers, and the intoxicating, almost dizzying aroma of ambition. I was barely out of college, brimming with an idealism that, in hindsight, was almost painfully naive. My dream was Synapse, a software startup designed not just to process data, but to revolutionize data analytics, making complex insights accessible and actionable for everyone, from small businesses to large enterprises. It wasn't just a business venture, it was my passion, my identity, the tangible manifestation of everything I believed technology could be, an equalizer, an enabler. I poured every ounce of my being into it, late nights fueled by cheap, lukewarm coffee and an unshakable belief, the sacrifice of any semblance of a social life, the constant financial tightrope walks where every penny counted. My small team and I worked with a fervent dedication, a shared conviction that we were building something truly groundbreaking. We were young, yes, barely seasoned graduates, but our ideas were fresh, our code was clean, our algorithms innovative, and our vision was crystal clear. We believed in the pure power of ingenuity, in the meritocracy of the tech world, that the best ideas, if nurtured properly, would always rise to the top. We were learning, adapting, growing, and for a short, beautiful period, it felt like nothing could stop us. Then, I met Sterling Thorne. He was already a titan in the industry, an established figure whose company, Legacy Tech, dominated a significant market share, a sprawling entity that had grown fat on early successes and traditional business models. I encountered him at an industry event, a sprawling tech expo humming with the nervous energy of hopeful innovators and the confident swagger of established players. I was a wide-eyed idealist, standing by my humble booth, presenting my nascent prototype to anyone who would listen. He approached, flanked by a phalanx of silent, uniformed assistants, a man who seemed to take up more space than he was allotted. He listened, or rather, he watched with a condescending smirk that never quite left his lips, occasionally interjecting with dismissive questions that weren't designed to elicit information, but to underscore his supposed superiority. His words, when he spoke, were laced with thinly veiled contempt, calling my ideas untested, my vision quaint, and my entire approach amateurish. He actually laughed, a loud, booming guffaw that wasn't with me, but directly at me, in front of a small but influential crowd of potential investors and industry peers. It was a public humiliation, a stinging blow to my confidence, but I dismissed it as the arrogance of an old guard, a dinosaur threatened by progress, too set in his ways to recognize true innovation. I was wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. Thorne didn't stop at dismissive words. He saw not just a naive young woman with an untested idea, but a potential threat, however small and distant. He seemed to possess an almost predatory instinct for crushing nascent competition. He began to subtly, insidiously, undermine Synapse, operating from the shadows of his vast network. Rumors of our instability, of internal conflicts, or even of impending bankruptcy, would circulate through investor circles just before critical funding rounds, poisoning the well before we even had a chance to drink. Key talent we were attempting to recruit, brilliant engineers, visionary designers, would suddenly withdraw their applications, citing vague better opportunities that inevitably, and often quite publicly, led back to legacy tech. Our early pilot programs, carefully negotiated and launched with high hopes, encountered unexpected, inexplicable technical glitches, data corruption, system crashes, network failures, that always seemed to coincide with aggressive, often underhanded, marketing pushes from Thorne's company, which would then swoop in with their reliable solutions. He manipulated, he sabotaged, he systematically stifled our every attempt to gain traction, to grow, to even simply breathe. Synapse, starved of resources, bled dry of talent, and denied opportunity at every turn, withered. It wasn't a slow decline, it was a brutal orchestrated strangulation, drawn out just enough to watch the life drain out of it. I watched my dream, my creation, gasp its last breath, the servers falling silent, the desks emptying, the vibrant energy replaced by a cold, heavy stillness. The day Synapse officially closed its doors was the day my idealism died, extinguishing itself like a flickering candle in a hurricane. But from its ashes, something colder, infinitely more resilient, was born in its place. I remember sitting amongst the empty desks, the silent servers, the ghost of what had been years of my life, my heart, my soul, poured into that space, now just a hollow shell. The tears came, hot and bitter, an ocean of grief and frustration, but they were quickly replaced by a chilling clarity, a resolve so profound it felt like a new foundation forming within my very bones. I wasn't angry in a volatile, emotional way, I was resolute. I felt a core-deep conviction, a quiet oath whispered to the empty, echoing room, a promise forged in the crucible of defeat. I would not just rebuild, I would build something so formidable, so indispensable, so utterly dominant that sterling Thorne, for all his inherited power and arrogant bluster, would one day be forced to come to me, hat in hand, desperate for my help. This was my secret weapon, not just technical prowess or superior business acumen, though I would acquire both in abundance. It was an unyielding, patient, and strategically precise will to see justice served, not through emotional outburst or petty revenge, but through undeniable, overwhelming success. I would learn every lesson Synapse's failure taught me, master every skill I lacked, and then, from these ashes, I would rise, silently, unstoppably. Nexus Innovations was born that day, not from vengeance in its raw, destructive form, but from the cold, calculated pursuit of an undeniable truth. Merit would prevail, and the arrogant, the complacent, would eventually fall. For years, I worked in the shadows, metaphorically speaking, building Nexus from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. The immediate aftermath of Synapse's demise was a period of intense, almost painful introspection. I devoured books on corporate law, financial markets, advanced AI, and ethical leadership. I moonlighted as a freelance consultant, honing my skills, understanding the intricacies of the industry not just from a developer's perspective, but from a strategic, executive one. I issued flashy launches and premature hype, learning from the mistakes of Synapse's eager, public debut. Every hire was meticulous, chosen not just for their skill, but for their quiet dedication and collaborative spirit. Every line of code was perfected, every algorithm rigorously tested, every strategic partnership forged with long-term vision in mind, always quietly, always with an eye on the future. I surrounded myself with people who shared my quiet intensity, who understood that true innovation was built piece by painstaking piece, not with grand, empty pronouncements. My focus was singular, laser-sharp: create a technological ecosystem so robust, so innovative, and so integral to the future of the industry that it would become indispensable. Sterling Thorne, meanwhile, continued to operate within his established bubble, occasionally appearing in industry news, his pronouncements becoming increasingly out of touch. His company, Legacy Tech, once a titan, was slowly but surely losing its competitive edge, a lumbering giant unable to pivot. He was a creature of habit, relying on past glories, an extensive but aging network, and a deep-seated belief in his own unassailability, failing to adapt to the accelerating pace of technological change and the disruptive forces emerging around him. Nexus, by design, was the antithesis of that, agile, forward-thinking, and built on a foundation of genuine innovation. I allowed the whispers of Nexus's rising star to circulate, controlled and curated, like a carefully cultivated garden. We began to win awards, secure lucrative contracts, and quietly acquire smaller, promising startups. But I deliberately kept my personal profile low, almost invisible. I was Kaelen Vance, CEO of Nexus Innovations, a name that carried increasing weight in the industry, synonymous with cutting-edge technology and quiet competence, but not one that Sterling Thorne would immediately connect to the young woman he'd crushed a decade prior. My public appearances were rare, my interviews guarded, my personal details almost non-existent. He was too consumed by his own declining empire, too arrogant to truly notice the subtle shifts in the market, let alone recognize the architect behind them. He dismissed Nexus as yet another upstart, perhaps, but one too small to truly register on his radar. A decade had passed, enough time for most people to forget the small, ill-fated Synapse. But not me. I knew Legacy Tech was struggling. Their core products, once industry standards, were becoming obsolete, their market share was eroding rapidly, and their once unassailable position was becoming increasingly precarious. The industry buzzed with speculation about their future, about Thorne's increasingly desperate attempts to stay relevant, to recapture past glories. My plan wasn't about personal attacks or public shaming in the early stages. That would have been too emotional, too fleeting. It was about creating an undeniable, irrefutable reality where Nexus was the only viable solution to problems Legacy Tech couldn't solve, and indeed, was increasingly creating for itself through its own stagnation. I watched from a distance as Thorne's company faltered, as their stock price dipped to historic lows, as their once loyal clients began looking elsewhere, openly expressing their frustration with outdated systems and lack of innovation. They had become a cautionary tale in business schools. Their critical project, the one he was now pitching to me with such desperate fervor, was, as I had anticipated years ago, their last, desperate gamble, a Hail Mary pass designed to modernize their infrastructure and prevent total collapse. Nexus, I knew with absolute certainty, had already developed the very technology Legacy Tech needed, refined over years of quiet development, tested in countless scenarios. We were the only ones with the specific expertise, the proprietary algorithms, and the proven track record to pull them back from the brink. He saw a lifeline, I saw a carefully laid trap, sprung with perfect, almost poetic, timing. My silence, my measured responses in the rare industry interviews I granted, my avoidance of the direct limelight, all of it was interpreted by Thorne, if he even noticed, as the quiet confidence of a rising star, not the calculated patience of a predator who had stalked his prey for years. He was growing desperate, and desperation, I had learned, makes even the most arrogant men blind, causing them to overlook the very signs that would otherwise scream danger. The climax arrived with a quiet intensity that belied the years of build-up, the relentless effort, the suppressed emotion. Thorne had finally finished his lengthy, impassioned plea. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a mix of desperate hope and the familiar, condescending expectation that his reputation alone would sway me, that his mere presence was an honor. "So, Ms. Vance," he began, a triumphant smirk finally playing on his lips, "I trust Nexus Innovations sees the immense mutual value in this partnership? This is not just a project, it's a legacy. My legacy, to be precise." He even puffed out his chest slightly. I let a moment of silence hang in the air, allowing his words to echo in the cavernous boardroom, each syllable a reverberation of his self-delusion. The silence stretched, growing heavier with each passing second, a palpable weight that made Thorne's initial confidence waver, just slightly. Then, I leaned forward ever so slightly, matching his intensity, my voice calm, clear, and perfectly modulated, devoid of any discernible emotion. "Mr. Thorne," I began, my gaze locking onto his, unwavering, almost piercing through the layers of his arrogance. "I find your presentation illuminating. It confirms much of what my team and I have observed about legacy tech's current challenges." I paused, letting my words sink in, watching his smirk falter, a flicker of uncertainty, a ripple of unease, crossing his face. A faint flush started to creep up his neck. "But before we delve into the mutual value of this proposed partnership, I have a question for you. A rather simple one, perhaps." He shifted in his seat, slightly uncomfortable now, the confident veneer beginning to crack under the unexpected scrutiny. "Of course, Ms. Vance. Anything." He tried to sound magnanimous, but his voice had a new, less assured edge to it. "Do you remember," I continued, my voice dropping just a fraction, a barely perceptible shift in tone, "a small software startup called Synapse? It existed about 10 years ago. It had a unique vision for data analytics, a novel approach to predictive modeling." His brow furrowed, a vague flicker of recognition, quickly dismissed as unimportant. He waved a hand dismissively. "Synapse? I don't believe I'm familiar with it, Ms. Vance." "Not specifically, no. Many small startups come and go, as you know. The industry is saturated, always has been. It's a harsh world out there for the unprepared." He attempted a dismissive chuckle, a hollow sound that died in his throat, unable to conjure the intended effect of casual superiority. His eyes darted, avoiding mine. "Perhaps," I said, my voice now laced with a steely edge he couldn't possibly mistake, a cold certainty that cut through the pleasantries like surgical steel. "Perhaps then you'd remember a young woman. Ambitious. Naive, perhaps. Full of hopeful, foolish ideas. Who you publicly dismissed at an industry event, laughing at her, humiliating her in front of her peers. Who you then systematically undermined, spreading ruinous rumors through your networks, quietly poaching her key talent, creating insidious glitches that ensured her venture's slow, agonizing demise." My eyes held his, piercing through his carefully constructed facade of indifference, dissecting his memory. "A young woman named Kaelen Vance." The color drained from his face with an almost theatrical speed. His confident posture crumbled, his shoulders slumping as if under an invisible weight. His eyes widened in horrified recognition, the name finally clicking into place, connecting the disparate dots of the past decade, pulling them together into a terrifying, undeniable constellation. The Kaelen Vance he had dismissed, mocked, and ultimately crushed, was now the Kaelen Vance whose company he desperately needed, the one holding his very survival in her hands. The silence in the room was absolute, deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. My team, witnessing this exchange, exchanged bewildered glances, their confusion slowly morphing into dawning comprehension as the unasked questions about my past were answered in Thorne's rapidly crumbling expression. A few of them subtly straightened, an unspoken understanding passing between us. You are. He stammered, his voice barely a whisper, a strangled sound, his eyes darting frantically around the room as if searching for an escape, a hidden door, anything to flee the sudden, inescapable reality. Yes, Mr. Thorne, I confirmed, my voice gaining strength, resonating with years of suppressed truth, of patient waiting, of quiet resolve. It filled the room, cold and clear. I am that Kaelen Vance. The one whose dreams you mocked. The one whose company you suffocated. The one you thought you had erased from the industry, from memory. And now, you sit here, pleading for the very services that I, and Nexus Innovations, are uniquely positioned to provide. The irony, I assure you, is not lost on me. In fact, it is the cornerstone of this meeting. I leaned back then, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, my voice calm, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to his visible panic. You claimed this project was your legacy. And you are correct. It is a legacy. Yours, and mine. His jaw worked, clenching and unclenching, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, or perhaps, realizing the true nature of the predator in the room, realized he was the prey. He was trapped, utterly and completely, in a net of his own making. However, I continued, my voice unwavering, relentless, your legacy of destruction and arrogance has one final act to play out. Nexus Innovations does not partner with individuals who operate with such a blatant disregard for integrity, innovation, and basic human decency. We build, Mr. Thorne, we do not destroy. And we certainly do not enable those who do, nor do we align ourselves with those whose past ethical breaches are so clearly indicative of their present character. My gaze swept across his pale team, then back to him, unblinching, making sure every word landed with full force. Therefore, Mr. Thorne, your proposal is rejected. Categorically. Furthermore, given your past unethical practices, and the profound lack of judgment you've displayed both then and now in thinking you could simply erase your actions, Nexus Innovations will be issuing a public statement detailing our decision and the reasons behind it, with full transparency. I'm afraid your services, and indeed your presence, are no longer required. For this project, for this meeting, and, I suspect, for your company, Legacy Tech, as a whole. The immediate aftermath was a scene etched into my memory with chilling precision, playing out exactly as I had envisioned countless times. Sterling Thorne, who moments before had exuded unshakable confidence, now stood utterly deflated, a hollowed-out shell of the man he once was. His face, once ruddy with self-importance, was now ashen, his eyes wide with a desperate, trapped animal look. He stammered, tried to object, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no coherent words formed. He looked utterly lost, as if the ground had literally opened beneath him, swallowing his carefully constructed world whole. His own team, pale and shocked, watched him with a mixture of pity and terror. They had no doubt witnessed his arrogance before, even suffered under it, but they had never seen it so utterly, publicly, and irreversibly dismantled. The silence from them was more damning than any accusation. I stood up slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled, the quiet rustle of my suit the only sound. This meeting is concluded, I announced, my voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. My team, sensing the gravity of the moment, quickly gathered their belongings, their movements efficient and respectful, avoiding eye contact with Thorne and his humiliated associates. They knew, without needing to be told, that this was not just a business meeting, it was the culmination of something far deeper. As I turned to leave, I cast one last, lingering look at Sterling Thorne. He sank back into his chair, a defeated man, his head bowed, his once booming voice now silenced, perhaps forever. The whispers would begin immediately, I knew. The news would spread like wildfire through the industry, through every tech forum and every venture capital firm. The story of Synapse, of its quiet demise, and the spectacular, public retribution exacted by its founder, would become legend. Thorne's professional reputation, already shaky from years of complacency, was now irrevocably shattered, reduced to dust. His company, clinging by a thread, would likely follow suit, unable to secure the critical partnership they so desperately needed, unable to find another lifeline after being so publicly rejected by Nexus. Months have passed since that day, and the ripples of that boardroom revelation continue to spread, reshaping segments of the industry. Nexus Innovations has soared to even greater heights, our reputation for integrity and unparalleled innovation solidified across the globe. We chose to channel the energy of that moment not into further recrimination or gloating, but into pioneering new technologies, into fostering a culture of genuine collaboration, ethical innovation, and social responsibility. Our growth has been exponential, but it has been built on a foundation of trust and respect, both internally and externally. Sterling Thorne? His name now carries the weight of a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when arrogance and unethical practices define a career. Legacy Tech imploded within weeks, unable to recover from the crushing loss of market confidence and the public revelations of Thorne's past conduct, which, once brought into the light, invited further scrutiny and ultimately, its downfall. He vanished from the industry, a ghost haunting the margins, his legacy indeed defined by the very actions he intended to bury forever. As for me, my focus has shifted entirely from the past to the future, to the next great challenge, the next breakthrough. The quiet strength I cultivated in those lean years, the unwavering belief in my vision, now drives Nexus to push the boundaries of what's possible, to innovate with purpose, to build for a better future. My story isn't one of pure, destructive vengeance, though justice was certainly served. It's a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of a vision, no matter how small it starts, and the undeniable truth that true power isn't found in tearing others down. It is found in meticulously, patiently, and quietly building something so profound, so indispensable, so utterly superior, that those who once dismissed you are forced to confront the magnitude of their misjudgment, not through confrontation, but through the overwhelming reality of your success. Never underestimate the quiet ones, for their resolve often burns the brightest, and their patience can outlast even the most towering arrogance, ultimately bringing down giants with the precision of a silent, perfectly aimed strike.